Welcome, everybody. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our building bilingual programs in Montessori schools. For those of you that are new here, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. The project came about in 2020 from the many conversations that were happening between people searching for information about best practices for Montessorians working with more than one language in their school. In this photo, you can see at the Lead Montessori Conference open space session in Prague that was in 2019. This was one of those conversations and the origin of bilingual Montessori. Currently, there is little training and support for this work, having bilingualism in the classrooms. So everyone is out there on their own trying to do their best. And there's also little research for Montessori schools on this topic and not enough documentation of effective practices, which is why we have Danielle here, because she has done just that. As you are here, you know that there's a lot of challenges down this path. The number of schools and educators finding themselves in the situation is growing. And so is this community we are creating together with you. And our founding partners applied for and received a 3-year grant from Erasmus to support our project. And it was launched in 2022. Some of you submitted letters during this time to support us, stating that you feel that this project is important and very needed. We thank you for that, and we want everyone to understand that from the very beginning, this has been a community project. So the approach to this challenge comes from the whole school perspective, as we work with the specific needs of the different groupings that make up a school, namely the Montessori guides, the language specialists, and the school leaders. Keeping those groupings in mind, we are developing the grant outcomes in 3 different areas. First, we're creating a design process field guide that will share effective classroom and administrative practices from Montessori schools and second language acquisition information for supporting the goal of bilingual education. Second, we will be offering a 3-level online training course based on this field guide for those wanting to build or improve a bilingual Montessori school with support. Third, we are creating a community for us all to engage, to practice, to support each other through different activities, such as these community conversations, our social media groups, and the Bilingual Montessori website. This Erasmus project is formed from partners from 4 different European countries. Our team consists of a group of carefully selected experts who've joined across Europe to work towards our bilingual Montessori outcomes. On our team, we have Mirka Vlachkova, the founder and executive director of the Montessori Institute of Prague in the Czech Republic, as our project coordinator. Dr. Mary Kay McCabe, who founded Madrid Montessori School in 2006 and in 2018 created learning ecologies to offer training courses and consulting services for Montessori educators specializing in bilingualism. Maria Smirnova, who founded and operated 4 bilingual schools in Paris and is now supporting others to open schools across Europe. Her French company, Montessori at Work, is a bilingual Montessori project partner. Maria brings her interest in design processes and her expertise as a children's house guide and elementary guide to our project. Lucy Wellstead is the founder and director of the Montessori School Cordoba International School, a bilingual school in Spain. She represents the Education for Life group as a partner organization. Lucy's experience as an entrepreneur and school leader brings important insight for those creating bilingual schools or second language programs. Dr. Aoife Ahern is a professor of language education at the Universidad Complutense of Madrid. She's a bilingual education expert and teacher educator in the area of second language learning, who guides us in our research and provides really strong support in the area of second language learning. Lucy Urbanchikova is an experienced ESL teacher and language coordinator at Montessori Schools Andělek in Prague, Czech Republic. She brings her years of experience as an English teacher and strong organizational skills to our project. And myself, Amy Tobias, I joined the team as our project manager. I'm an experienced Montessori elementary guide in some bilingual settings, and I've worked 6 years as a coordinator of a bilingual education program. And Plamena Koliva joins us as our Erasmus project consultant, who supports us with many aspects of the project along the way. So we are a strong team together, all working with great passion and enthusiasm to create bilingual Montessori. But each one of you are also part of our journey, so please keep in touch with us via our website and social media. Let us know your needs and feedback on the project. We'd love to hear from you. You can simply send an email at hello@bilingualmontessori.com, which is on the website. So now I'm going to pass this to Lucy, who will give you a short update about something that's happening with our project, so you know more information.
Hello. I just would like to follow up Amy's introduction. She already talked a little bit about the online course we're preparing and we're working on very hard as of now, even though the course will happen in autumn 2024, and it will be a compilation of all the knowledge, information and research we will have collected in the 3 years of work of this project. And one of the main mottos or the main driving force of our work is the whole school approach. Therefore, this course will be created both for the 3 target groups, the Montessori guides, second language teachers in the Montessori setting, and school leaders. So they will get not only information for their work, but the course will be set up so everyone learns about the whole school, all the parts that will be the key to a successful second language program or bilingual program in the Montessori setting for 6 to 12. So more information will be coming up as we approach the date, but we just wanted to share this information with you so you know what to look forward to. And now I would like to pass my word to Mary Kay, who will start the session.
So I just want to take a moment and welcome Danielle. Danielle DesLauriers, who is originally from North Carolina. She got her undergraduate degree in biology and chemistry from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She then has spent different periods in Spain as a teacher. But what I think what we really see and what she shares with us today is she really is a scientist. She has a very precise way of looking at things. Also, Danielle is fortunate enough. In Spain we have one training center that's actually located in a university, the University of Vic. And that's where Danielle did her training for 0 to 3 and 3 to 6. And because it's in a university, the trainees have the opportunity to go on and do a master's. And Danielle did take that opportunity, no surprise. And essentially, some of what she's presenting two things for us today. She's presenting results of her research from her master's thesis, and then how she's applied that in her 3 to 6 environment. And she's worked at the same school for 8 years in a small city in the north of Spain called Logroño. She, in her presentation, will tell you a bit about the demographics of the students, the families in the school, basically Spanish, not an international city. And yeah, so it's a very special opportunity we have to listen to Danielle and this bringing together of the theory and the research with the actual practice. Not many people can claim to be experts to both. So thank you so much, Danielle, for agreeing to share this knowledge with all of us. We're really glad to have you here. And I will let you take it over from here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to open up my slides. All right. All right, well, thank you for the introduction, Mary Kay. I'm very excited to be able to share with a greater community of people who are interested in the same things that I am. I'm like to share with you today my experience in the last 8 years of encouraging the acquisition of English as a foreign language among Spanish-speaking children aged 3 to 6 in our school at Montessori Schoolhouse, Logroño. The challenges that we faced, and believe me, there have been many, it motivated me to search for solutions in the existing literature, and eventually drove me to pursue my own research as part of my thesis for my master's in Montessori pedagogy. Today, I specifically want to share with you some research-based approaches that have really resulted from these inquiries, and also some strategies that have been born from informal experimentation and observation. So on the screen, when it wants to go, there it is. You can see a photo of our school. It's a bilingual school, Spanish-English, where curricular content is taught in both languages. It's a small school. We have 4 classes, mixed ages, infant community, which has children from 18 months to 3 years of age. Today, we'll be talking about the 3 to 6 stage, which is in Children's House. Lower Elementary has children from first to 3rd grade, and upper has children from 4th to 6th grade. In each classroom, we have 2 educators, 1 native English speaker and 1 native Spanish speaker. Although the English-speaking educators address the children exclusively in their native tongue, the children know that we understand Spanish, and they are free to respond in the language of their choosing, whether that be in their native language of Spanish, in English, or in a mix of both, which is quite often the case. We often hear sentences like, estoy workando, no? Because mixing both Spanish and English, or ya la he clineado. This is very important for us, especially in the early stages and trying to stay faithful to the Montessori principles, and that we want second language production to always be free and spontaneous. That is, when the child speaks in English, we want them to be because they've chosen to do so, and not because they feel pressured or forced. 95% of our students are from monolingual Spanish-speaking home environments. And when they leave the classroom, they are met with a Spanish-dominant environment outside the school, where community support for the second language is limited or essentially non-existent. Therefore, the majority of our students are only exposed to English like their exposition is restricted to the school environment. And this poses a difficulty, an added difficulty, in that the critical importance of input for second language acquisition is well established in the literature. And it's actually more considered now a non-contested fact than a hypothesis among second language research circles. Also, there's widespread agreement that the amount that the second language input that the child receives is key in predicting the eventual proficiency that the child will reach in the said language. In Montessori, at this stage, we have an extra added difficulty due to the highly individualized nature of instruction at these levels. Each child progresses through the curriculum at their own rate, whether that be in maths and reading and writing in both languages. And since we have children from 3 to 6 years of age, you can imagine that at any given period of time, every child is prepared for a different activity, a different lesson. So, for example, we often see there's some children that are working with the numbers from 1 to 9, while there are other children simultaneously working with the numbers up to 10,000, for example. And logically, these children need different lessons. So even though there are group lessons, for this reason, individual lessons predominate at this stage. In my classroom, I know that each class is different. I allow 2 children to be able to observe the presentation of one of their classmates. So in this scenario, when you think about it, at any given time during the lesson, 1 child and a max of 3 children are receiving second language input for the duration of the presentation. We can see how that greatly limits the amount of input that they're actually receiving. It's not just a question of input quantity, but also of quality. Some researchers believe that the input must be, the second language acquirer must actually understand the input for it to be effective. Others advocate the importance of input obtained in communication and interaction, whereas others stress the importance of input that really provokes a response in the learner, that really gets to them. And others, the importance of monolingual input, that being that the children can speak to me in Spanglish or in mixed languages, but I'm not going to code mix or speak to them in Spanglish. So actually although there is a strong consensus in the field that without input, successful language acquisition just cannot take place, there's a lot of disagreement between researchers and theorists concerning whether input in itself is enough. There's some that think that they argue that input in itself is sufficient, whereas others, although they agree that input is essential, they argue that input alone in itself is an insufficient condition for second language acquisition to occur. And they point to the importance of output, of communicative output, that is, that the second language learner is producing the second language. When we opened the school 8 years ago, we had all of we trusted and just thought that after exposing the children to a second language, that after some time, naturally, they would start little by little to speak in English. And well, that did happen for some of our children. However, for a lot of our children, although they had very high levels of listening comprehension, they struggled to construct simple sentences. And some of them just didn't speak at all. They were totally happy speaking in Spanish. They didn't have to push themselves and they stayed there. So the difference in speaking proficiency that we observed among the students, well, it is actually in line with a widely acknowledged phenomenon in second language acquisition literature, namely that individuals vary with the rate at which they acquire a second language. This is logical. They have also identified several variables that predict individual differences in second language acquisition and eventual proficiency. These variables can fall under generally two umbrella terms, which are child external and child internal variables. Child external variables include the age at which the child was first exposed to the second language and the length of second language exposure, the quantity and quality of input, second language input at school and at home, in addition to the community use of second language. The child internal variables include language aptitude, cognition, personality, motivation, social factors. And while I was trying to get to the bottom of why these children had such different levels of speaking proficiency, I chose for my master's thesis to focus on this aspect, to try to explain why we were seeing such different levels of speaking of production. To do this, I chose to center on child external variables. And since the school environment and the city of residence, the first language dominant city of residence, were the same among these children, making them rough equivalents, rough constants, I chose to focus on three exposure variables: the age of onset, that is the age at which they were first exposed to the second language, length of the second language exposure, as well as the child's linguistic conditions in the home environment. So, oh, now I'm going back, no. So my main research question was, can differential second language exposure outside the school explain some of the second language production variation observed in the classroom? This can be divided into three sub-questions. The first, what is the relationship between the language that the mother uses to speak to the child in the home environment and the child's level of second language production? Can the age at which the child was first exposed to the second language account for some of the variation observed in second language production? And is the length of second language exposure related to second language proficiency in this group of children? To answer these questions, I examined these three exposure variables and how they were related to production, levels of production among 24 first language Spanish children aged 3 to 6 that were in my class in the 2019-2020 school year. And since in Montessori we have mixed ages, I divided these children into 3 different groups. We have first year students, second year students, and third year students. Criteria for inclusion in the study required assigned parental consent and also completed parental questionnaire. So here I have some of the parents who responded. Most of them only spoke Spanish to the child at home. 3 of them said mostly Spanish, and when asked to specify, they said, well, sometimes I count in English or we sing a song. So it was basically, they reported 92 to 99% of the time Spanish only. And the second language in the house was reported for 4 parents total. They were all mothers, which is why I decided to focus on maternal input. They reported 3 half of the time to speaking 50-50. So they would say 50% in Spanish, 50% in English at home. And one mother reported to using exclusively English to speak to her child in the home environment. I took age of onset to be the time at which the age at which the child had regular contact with a person, a direct presence of a person who spoke to them consistently or exclusively in English. And the length of exposure I calculated by subtracting the age of onset from the age at the time of the study. So the first challenge in all of this, to obtain clear audiovisual footage of interactions between a native speaker and a child. Okay, this seems very simple, but when you work in a Montessori environment at this stage, you maybe are understanding where I'm getting to. You want also the children to be unaware that they're being recorded or filmed, because it greatly alters their behavior. So we need audio, video footage, very clear. Well, the challenge of this. So children at this stage, they not only choose, by the way, this is 3 hours and 30 seconds. Sorry about that. They not only choose the activity that they're going to work with, but they also choose where they're going to work, how long they're going to work, with who they're going to work. And while the children are working, the educators, we give new lessons depending on what the child needs. And so we use the space available, the tables available, the rug space available to give these new lessons. Therefore, a fixed camera, hidden camera is of no use in this scenario. Believe me, I have tried to use many different ways to capture this interaction with my students. I've tried spy cams. They're very uncomfortable because you sit side by side with a child. And I had one here that was like a pin in my pocket. And to try to capture their response was very awkward. You couldn't really do it. And I also tried secret hidden cameras in objects. You know, I've made my homemade ones, and when those didn't work, I've used, you know, they are like, why is that Coca-Cola can on the table? Like, why is that yours? Are you going to drink that? They're not easy to fool. So actually, the 2019-2020 school year, the distance learning mandated by the pandemic, created a really rare and unique opportunity to be able to capture these interactions. So the main objective was, of course, to maintain contact with my students during this time, but a secondary contact was to work with the curricular content. For example, to continue exposing them to English.
Blue hat, green hat, red hat. Oops.
To work on
Let's see.
sound letter
Let's see.
association.
Is that?
And also we worked with at-level maths presentations, and we continued practice reading in English throughout the pandemic. I think this scenario is very familiar for a lot of educators who have been going through this time. This footage was invaluable in being able to finally become more aware and study in great depth these language behaviors that these children were exhibiting. So in total, I had 124 sessions recorded with the children. It was about 70 hours of footage. I transcribed the footage and coded, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and also analyzed this footage for their production. So there is not any one measure in existence in the current moment, numerical measure, that can fully capture the complexity of a child's speech in their first language and their second language. It just doesn't exist at the moment. However, there are valid measures that help to quantify production. For my study, I chose the mean length of utterance in morphemes. So basically, you take the number of morphemes that a child says and you divide it by their sum of utterances. For example, here we would have one morpheme, one utterance, it would be one. I'm going to give you a more detailed example. This is a small bit of a transcript. I recorded the experimenter utterances. This would be me, what I was saying in this column, the child's responses, or what they were saying in this column. I went through and counted the number of morphemes, and would count the number of utterances. And so at the bottom of this long Excel, in the end, you would divide the total number of morphemes by the total number of utterances to get a numerical value to quantify the production. So in all three groups, in all three age groups, the children that received maternal input in the home environment obtained the highest production scores, as we can see here. Also, the age at which the children were first exposed to the second language was, the earlier ages were correlated with higher speaking, with higher production scores. So basically, the earlier that they were the exposure, the higher the production score was the general trend, especially for second and third years. And production scores increased in general as the length of exposure increased. I'm sharing all this with you because I find it incredibly interesting, but not to show off my graphs, which I think are very beautiful, but because there's as we were mentioning earlier, there is not very much research on children who have no need to produce a second language. There's whole volumes written about children who are immigrants to the United States and who are now incorporated into the public school system in the United States. There's whole volumes about immigrant children in Canada, but those children, their second language environment is the dominant environment and outside. So it's very different. Our scenario is very different. And actually, a lot of researchers say that if there's no need, there's no acquisition. No, and I see that's not the case. They don't need to speak to me, but they speak to me a lot, a lot. They love speaking. So also, I bring it up because as an educator and anybody working with children, it's incredibly interesting because once you have this experience of quantifying production, and those are a lot of hours of counting morphemes, I went through a time where I couldn't stop counting morphemes. Even friends and family that were speaking to me, I would calculate their mean length and utterance. And it's something that I'm doing in the school, and it's helping me to track the progress, but it's informal. I'm not, of course, I thought my next plan would be a GoPro. Of course, they're going to know that it's there, but if I start to wear it, then eventually they'll get used to it and it won't be something new. But anyways, now that I've shared a bit of that research with you, I'd like to go back to the dilemma that I was explaining before in our school. So we said that there's no obligation to use or need to use the second language. And also these children have limited opportunities to use the second language. So for us, it was extremely important to find ways to encourage second language production without forcing it. So first, it was to optimize the input in terms of quantity and quality. And second, to encourage output. That is to give them, create context, create situations that give them a little bit of a push, a gentle push, but a push, and see what happens. So this is my classroom. And the children in this class, as I mentioned before, are 3 to 6 years of age. I'm first going to discuss with you, share with you some of the ways that we have optimized input. And then after, I'm going to mention some ways we've encouraged output. And these have been effective in encouraging second language production. So I think the main thing, the most important thing was to define our learning objectives. You cannot ever forget that you are dealing with a foreign language. It's a foreign language. These children are exposed to this language in one context in a lot of cases, and you can never forget about that. It seems very simple to say, but you know that in the Montessori curriculum, there's a lot of nomenclature, and I love this nomenclature. For example, we work with the forms of the leaves, we work with the nomenclature, the names of the countries of the world, and the nomenclature of the geometric shapes. There's a wealth of words that we're working with here. And I love when kids would come up to me and say, Danielle, this leaf is half-state. Wow, impressive. But what sense does it make if this child can tell me this very advanced vocabulary word, but they lack the core vocabulary, the basic vocabulary for the words that are in their immediate surroundings related to botany? Tree, flower, stem. No, these are the names of the countries. It's great that they know how to say Western Sahara and they show me to it. And they do. And it's great. They come up and say, Danielle, this is an obtuse angled isosceles triangle, you know? But what sense does it make if they can say that Warsaw is the capital of Poland, but they lack the vocabulary for everything they find around them? Children at this age, they talk about concrete things that are in their reality, about here and now, about their life and their experiences. And they won't be able to do that no matter how much they want to if they lack this vocabulary. I'm giving examples of vocabulary in this example of defining learning objectives, but we did it also with grammar and other areas of second language of English in the school. So for us, in the example of vocabulary, we made a selection. It's not only the words that are on the screen, it's actually a quite extensive list, but it was a way to kind of focus our energies. Okay, these are the words that we want to work with, or the structures we want to work with, and we're going to use those to guide and inform all of our decisions that we make in the school. And this is what we did. We defined clearly, the vocabulary list included high frequency words, the most frequent words in the English language, key vocabulary for things that the child finds in its immediate environment, the vocabulary for Cambridge exams. I don't know if other schools do this, but at higher levels, starting in 4th or 5th or 6th grade, our children start to take the Cambridge exams. And also phonetic and practical vocabulary in preparation for when they begin to read. The children, when they start to read, they associate the letter with their sounds and they start to put it together. Whenever, for example, in the case, this would be j, jug. And if they know this word ahead of time, it's a click. It's like, oh! It's such an exciting moment. You can see the excitement on the child's face, and it really is something that catches their interest, and they realize I'm capable of producing a word, and it keeps them engaged. Also, it makes the practice meaningful. It's great if you can read the words, but if you don't know what they are, then it makes no sense. And so it's so essential. And of course, this is at all levels in the progression of reading, not just in the initial stages with the CVC words, but throughout the whole progression. And practical, I say practical, why? Because there are a lot of phonetic words in English. For example, muff. When is the last time you saw somebody walking down the street with a muff, wearing a muff? My guesses are not often. No, there's a lot of beautiful materials that we've come across that have incredibly impractical vocabulary, and we've had to make a selection and say, okay, this material, no, it's not useful. So in doing this, we've been able to work with this vocabulary now from the early stages. Before they get to the 3 to 6 stage, we work with this vocabulary in the earlier stages, in the infant community stage. So when they come and they're 18 months, they start working with these words. We work with these vocabulary words every day in group activities. And we always try to make when we work with this vocabulary in group, to really find ways that impress the children, to catch their attention, to surprise them. And that really helps with their memory and for them to retain this vocabulary. It, as I said earlier, that it informs a lot of decisions we make in the school. The books, of course, we choose to read to them. The school menu is just also planned around these words. The activities that the kids work with in the classroom, the snacks that they have in the afternoon, the polishing objects, the objects we have to polish in the end, because there's a lot of conversation about this. Look, the grapes are clean, or the plants they take care of in the inside environment, also the outside environment. What we plant and harvest in the school garden, the art activities we have, the articles of clothing we have to fold, objects in the nature observation tray, even the objects we have in the stereomastic exercises. The idea is to use any opportunity at all to be able to work with this vocabulary. Now I'm giving the example of vocabulary, but there's also grammar, that we've done the same. And this isn't to say that these are the only words that we use with the children, that we limit their vocabulary. No. It's an extensive list, but by no means is it the only vocabulary we use with them. It just helps us to clearly define the learning objectives, and that way be able to assess and evaluate individual student progress and make sure that we're giving them, in the end, a mental dictionary full of practical vocabulary for when the moment that they're ready to speak, that they will be able to have access to these words to be able to do so. Also, it's important to be conscious of the type of input that you're giving to them. I often speak to the children in the class as I would speak to a family member, as I would speak to a friend. But it is important sometimes to slow things down, to enunciate very clearly, to find moments to clearly mark word boundaries. And one of the things that this helps with is when they start to produce, it helps them to be able to construct sentences. It helps them to be able to discern or distinguish one word within a sentence. In English, at least in our case of English, a lot of times it seems to blend together. One way to do this that is very fun is the fast slow game. We sing a song, for example. I'm sure a lot of you do this in your classes. You sing very fast, but then the important part is you sing slow. And when you sing slow, you make a point to clearly separate the words. I have an example, a very short example of that.
Fast first and then slow. Ready? Fast. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Steady and gentle, steady and gentle.
Okay, so you can see there a very short example, but something that we often use. Also, to take the time when you give them an object or you work with them, and this is something that is also part of the 0 to 3 training in Montessori, when you give them an object, to say its name very clearly. Pen, or shell. Make this moment that they can take the time to connect the word to the vocabulary word in isolation. Ask yourself before you sing a song with them or before you read a book with them, whatever activity you do with them, is the grammar and the vocabulary useful? Because there are a lot of nursery rhymes that I sang or songs that I sang as a child growing up that I really love, but does it make sense to use them? Because sometimes the vocabulary is really antiquated or the grammar is very odd or forced. It's just important to ask yourself these questions, to be mindful of the information you're giving them, and always keep in mind it's a foreign language for them. Ways to increase input: we increased group activities in the classroom. Have native speaking educators in the classroom at all times or throughout the school day routine. So not just during the work cycle, but also at recess and during physical education and during lunch. I don't typically wear a witch costume. It was for Halloween, a special occasion, but it's important to have them throughout the day. Another technique that we do is called recast, and I think a lot of you probably do it intuitively without actually realizing that it's something that they've been that's been researched or that's been discussed in the literature. Basically, a recast is when a child makes a mistake or says something that's not grammatically correct, and a second person rephrases what they have said using the correct vocabulary or the correct grammar. For example, a child says, "I have 5," trying to say their age. So you say, yes, you are 5. I am 36, to give them this information. There are 2 mouses. 2 mice, they are so cute. So to give them this information for what they're trying to say. There are researchers who think that this helps that the second language learner becomes aware of gaps in their vocabulary or in their learning. And of course, at this age, a lot of things are in development. So maybe there are some structures at this point that they are not able yet to produce. They haven't gotten there into their development at that point. Another thing that I think that a lot of people end up intuitively doing is when the child speaks to me in Spanish, and what we do in our school is that we translate what they say, but in the most natural way ever. Because if you think about it, translating what somebody says is completely forced, but in a way that makes it seem exciting and interesting, and that you're like excited to hear about. For example, tengo una bici. They told me that I have a bike. You have a bike. would like to, like try to give them a little bit more input too. And this is something interesting that I found out through the years. If you do this and you sing a little bit, you use like a sing-songy voice and you dance a little bit, they're very highly likely to repeat what you've said spontaneously. No, for example, in our class, something that we hear a lot, are you there? No. So if you say after, help me please, and you kind of sing it and kind of dance with it, most of the time, in my case, at least, they end up saying it. They end up saying it on their own. And then over time, it just becomes part of the culture that everybody, instead of saying, oh, yeah, they start to say, help me, please. And then you push them a little bit further. So they tell me, help me, please. Can you help me, please, with the same dance and interesting work with the tonalities? There a lot of times continues, they repeat you. And take advantage of every opportunity to give them extra input. The official math presentation for working with the sandpaper numbers dictates that you trace it and you say the number. You can, and that's it. One. Okay, you can do that, but also maybe you could add an extra sentence. One. I have one nose. Give them extra. Just always be conscious of this. Another way we use to increase the input, the songs that we sing in circle, the favorites, the class favorites, we put in our listening to music activity. They have a little iPod with no screen that they can listen to music freely during the work cycle. We also take advantage and we put in music that works with objectives that we want, learning objectives, for example, that they count to 20, or that the shape or the key vocabulary. And it's real interesting because a lot of times what they'll start doing is they'll hear a song that they like, that they know the words to, and they'll just start singing it. And the children around them there's one that's peeling a cucumber. There's another one that's working on a maths exercise. There's another one that's washing a table. They're all working and concentrated. They start singing too. So you have this spontaneous singing concert when they're all producing the second language. They're all singing the song. No, it's a surprisingly simple thing, but it goes a really long way. This is something that we started quite recently. It's called Reading Buddies. Basically, children from the upper stages, from elementary, come and they read books in English to our children. And this has been very special. It's been a very beautiful activity so far. And since now I briefly shared with you how we've optimized input, I'd like to discuss briefly some ways that we've encouraged output. So in the class, I mentioned that earlier that we have in each class one native English speaker and one native Spanish speaker. So in my class, and this is Veronica, I have permission to introduce you to her. She is in my class. She gives the Spanish language for maths, for reading and writing in Spanish. We tried this a few years ago. I suggested that she try to start to speak to me in English. Her level isn't very great. It's kind of a basic level, but she started, and we all know at this stage, adults are so important for the children. The bond that they have is incredibly important for the child, and the child imitates the adults in their environment, for better or worse sometimes. When Pedro started speaking to me in English, the kids started speaking to me more in English as well. And also, I think one of the most interesting things was a lot of children took it upon themselves to become her personal English teacher. So they would come up with objects from the class and be to Veronica and say, shell, do you want to touch the shell? No, and so it's a really great way to see that this is this language learning and process. And so I've asked the same to all the adults who come to the classroom. If there's someone doing the practice teaching in my class, or the school cook, or a parent that feels comfortable enough to speak to me in English, I ask them in front of the kids, please try to speak to me in English, because the kids will imitate you. The books that they love that we read, and this is something that last week or 2 weeks ago, Florencia mentioned that she does as well. And we have class favorites. We have some books that we read over and over again. The kids just love them. And so these books that we read a lot, the kids more or less know how the story goes. And often during the work cycle, they'll take a book, they'll take it to a table, and they'll just start using their own language to tell what's going on in the story. And a lot of kids do something similar to what we see in this photo, where she's showing her book. She's reading her book to an imaginary audience, using her own words. She's talking in English, narrating what's happening. And sometimes they actually do end up with an audience of children who come around to listen to the story. So it's in a simple but very effective way. Open-ended questions. I think this is something a lot of us do. Instead of asking, do you like carrots? What's your favorite food? Try to like push them a little bit more. This is something that I came across when I was transcribing and coding and analyzing the data for my master's thesis. And I realized, and this is not a part of my thesis, it wasn't included. I was focused on a different research question, but I realized that when I asked the kids, I gave the kids a closed set of options. For example, which color do you want, red or green? That they responded to me 92% of the times in English. It's a surprising, simple, but effective way. And also for 3 options, it also was the same. I think it's a little bit higher because intuitively I probably did this. And as I said, it's not something formal that's published. It's just something that I came across and found incredibly interesting. Which do you prefer, apple, pear, orange? When it was 3 options, they responded about 98% of the time in English. And then, so after this all was said and done, and after I realized this, I wanted to see if it translated to the school environment. And it's really effective. And it's not just for one word answers. It actually works as they progress. And you, of course, try to know their level. It works for whole sentences. You can ask, which book do you want to read? Pug meets pig, or are you a cow? And they'll usually say the whole sentence just spontaneously. I know there are like small steps, but all of them come together to help to increase this production. In story time, pausing, pointing to a word to try to elicit vocabulary is very effective. And I think that this may be one of the most off the wall strategies I'm going to share with you today. Desperate times call for desperate measures, maybe. Basically, it's an activity where in circle for very short periods of time, I have this beautiful cape. It's very beautiful. It's sparkly. And the weirdest thing happens when I put on this cape. I can't understand Spanish anymore. And it's not forcing the kids to speak because they get to raise their hands. They can also share. I've discussed with them a lot that they can share something and have a friend translate for them, or they can share or if it's an open. And I was just really surprised the first time I did it because kids who never said anything in English would raise their hand, and they started saying, I like your capa, or they were trying to say, I like your cape. No, but they've gone from not saying anything to full sentences. And it really surprised me, the vocabulary that they possessed, because a lot of kids, they really push themselves to produce in this situation. I have a video. It is a longer video. It's about 5 minutes. The audio is a bit lower. I put subtitles so that I hope that it's understandable. Anyways, I'm going to play you the video.
Meteor. It sounds similar to the word for meteor in Spanish. Yes, okay. The meteor is the rock is the rock falls to the dinosaur. Oh, yes, you're right. Yes, they think that the meteor is a rock that fell on the dinosaurs, right? And that's why they're extinct. Mm-hmm. But anybody else like to say anything about meteor? Hector? The dinosaurs? No. Are there dinosaurs left? Did it kill all the dinosaurs? I don't know. The bird. Ah, the birds. Ah, yes. Gabriel? Dinosaurs? Do you want to think about it? You can raise your hand again. Think about it. What? I know. Spider? What did you say? You think that the dinosaur is he didn't know why he killed it.
Yes, we don't really know. Yes, we don't really know for sure what killed the dinosaur. We don't know for sure, but some people think it's a meteor. Some Lucas?
That nature is. And nature is the rock much bigger in the world.
It is a very, very big rock. Right.
And dinosaurs don't speak.
You know what dinosaurs don't think. Miranda would like to say something.
I love them.
Thank you so much.
They killed the dinosaurs with is to them with them. The planet didn't come anymore. The sun, that's the killed them. And they don't see.
Yeah, that's right. It covered up the sun, right?
Yeah.
And so it was very dark.
And never he kind of see. Yeah. And the plants don't grow. And that didn't see. And the water is very cold. So why we sun because the
That's right. Yes. Lucas wants to say something, Lucas?
Gabriel, a jacket about dinosaur.
Oh, he does. He has a jacket with a dinosaur.
No, and dinosaur.
Who has a dinosaur mask?
At that time, I dinosaur.
Dinosaur bones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Gabriel, say something. Then we have to eat lunch. Gabriel. Okay. And I think it's very clear to see that they are really trying as hard as they can to retrieve vocabulary, to express what they want to say. And meteor is not one of the words that's on our vocabulary list at this stage. This conversation came from them. It was spontaneous and they were interested. We went with it. I realized after there's a point where the child says, I have seen a lot of time dinosaur. And in the moment I thought he was saying bones, but it's actually he was trying to say prints. Because where we live, there are a lot of dinosaur prints. It's just incredibly interesting to see how they push themselves to produce. I have very short I think two or three more before concluding, but one of the most important things is to never forget the importance of the bond that you are establishing with these children at this early age. It's fundamental. The children, if you have a strong bond with a child, they will seek out opportunities to be with you, just to be with you. A lot of times I have a huge circle of children around me. It's difficult to walk sometimes because between activities, they want to come up and say something to me, or they want to observe the presentations. And when they go home, the parents say that a lot of them give presentations in English to them, even if their parents don't speak English. it's something that's really important to always take into account and remember that it helps with the learning process. Once we had this little push and we got the kids talking more, since it's mixed ages, the older kids were talking more, the newer ones that would come in would do so too. So it was kind of a self-perpetuating success. And very important, as a final note, the parent education. Inform parents about the acquisition of a second language, about how the child acquires a second language, about their needs, their specific needs, so that they can respond to the needs and help us in the school to work as a team to be able to create the conditions conducive to learning a second language without pressure and without stress. No, we're not going to go to a dinner party and say, my child goes to a bilingual school. Say something in front of a whole room of people that the child doesn't know. You need to avoid things like this at all costs, but to have a relaxed and also to give them resources and ideas. For all parents, there's parents that don't speak English, there's parents that speak English, there's parents that use a little bit of the screen, the children have screen time, there's parents that have no screen time at all. Give them ideas and resources that they can use outside the school to be able to provide the children with input outside the school. One of my favorite things, it's a project in process, it's not perfect yet, but we've got it started and it's been successful, is during the quarantine, I recorded myself reading some of the kids' favorite stories, and I made a YouTube channel, and I also made videos and audio. There's an option for only audio. The books that I'm reading are also available, a lot of them in our school library. So one of the resources, to give you an example of a resource we give parents, is that they can check out a book from the library and put on the audio so that their children can listen to the book at home. And we have a lot of activities like that the children can be exposed, increase their exposure outside school. We're going to continue reading, observing, experimenting, discovering, and not just, of course, at my level, but the whole school. And it's been a project and continues to be a project that involves the participation of all the members of our school community, including the students, the parents, the employees, the educators, and thanks for giving this opportunity to me to share. I hope that there's been ideas that maybe you guys could apply in your environments, or I hope that you will start quantifying the production and publishing some Montessori results to help to give us some more research from this area. And anyways, thanks very much. I will pass.
Danielle, that was amazing. So much in there. I don't even know where to begin, but really amazing. Many of the things the strategies that you've come across, like just what the last thing you said about taking stories that you recorded during the lockdown, and now they're available as audio when people take the books home from school. I mean, that's just brilliant. You're incredibly resourceful. And as I said in the beginning, I'm very appreciative that you've taken the time to prepare this to share with so many other people. So I do want to open it up to questions. I think we have a couple of questions in the chat itself. So when you have the group time, what is your strategy or advice so that everyone tries to get a chance to practice speaking?
So if it's the Golden Cape time, then there's no obligation. Of course, a lot of the children want to participate. A lot of them need a little bit of time to observe. And then, after a few sessions, they'll start participating. Also, I think it's important to mention this is by no means something I do every day. It's more of an experiment that maybe once every 3 weeks or so that I'll do to try to stimulate a little bit more production in group. So in group, a lot of the other strategies that I mentioned for pausing and singing songs that they like, these are ways to get them to started to producing. But of course, never call on a child who doesn't have their hand up or give them the opportunity eventually. And if they don't do it in group, then they'll do it individually a lot of the time.
And for me, what was clear in the video is that it's also about creating the space, because they are going to need time as they try to find the word that they have, but it doesn't just come immediately. And so I think that also for me was really powerful in your video, that it is about letting them, who's ever ready and inspired, and then also being patient and giving them that time, because I think as adults as well, we can get impatient and not necessarily give the time that they need. So another question is, what is your strategy to bring focus for those who struggle to understand and speak? I have experience observing children who lose focus because they get distracted as they have difficulty understanding.
So this requires a lot of patience and persistence on the educator's part, especially at first. A lot of reliance on things in the physical environment, a lot of gestures, miming. It happens. We have children who come to my class and they haven't been in the school before. So this is the first time that they're exposed to English. And it requires, for example, your glass. Where is your glass? And go with them to the furniture where we have all their glasses. And is this yours? A lot of time, and they need that time. It's really important that they have that silent period to be able to start to understand. So I would avoid presentations at first that require a lot of concentration, especially long ones. I'd keep it short and sweet for a while. I don't know what the circumstances are. But when we've had new children, that's been the case, and try to engage them, try to be as exciting as possible, and really, get them interested. So even if they don't understand the word, what you're doing, where I don't know what kind of lesson it would be, is interesting, whether it's to hide a number or to give you a letter or whatever they're doing in that point, just to capture their interest.
And well, I guess you started to say more or less how long these presentations last. And then someone asked, is the L1 teacher with you to help translate maybe what you're saying when you have the golden cape on?
No, we don't translate at all. We never translate, because we don't want to create a reliance on their after time. They're just kind of hanging out waiting for the other person to say something. So we don't translate. And I'm usually alone during that time. Of course, if there's a child, usually they're like 3-minute sessions. I left it on. I think that was like a record that day because the conversation was so interesting. And so many children wanted to participate. But in general, it's a very short period of time. And if there's a child who's has been hurt or they need that attention, you take it off immediately. It's not, and it's not the norm. I want to stress I think it's probably what stuck out most because it's such a bizarre thing to do, but it's been effective. And then lessons, as far as presentations, if you're referring to the CAPE, like usually max 3 minutes. It's just like a fun thing once in a while. Presentations at my level, they can last anywhere from 2 minutes and be short ones, but the ones when they get older can be up to sometimes 20 some minutes. I try to keep them short and sweet.
Okay.
That's the rule of thumb.
Yeah. And another question, do you make sure that you give the same individual presentations to each and every child in your group?
Yes, it's very important that every child progress through the same sequence of activities. Montessori is very structured in that first the children work with the numbers from 1 to 9. Once they master that, they work with the numbers from 10 to 20 to give it a clear example. So they do, and I'm not sure if it's referring to then, do we give the same presentation in Spanish and in English? I'm not sure if that's what's.
Well, if the person who asked it wants to put on their mic and clarify, that's fine.
Yes. Hi, hello, Danielle. And for sharing so much with us. Yes, I was just wondering about the English language presentations.
Yes, they all receive the same presentation. Yeah, and of course, there's children. I think who was in what someone mentioned before, that they have trouble capturing their attention. Where there's some children, for whatever reason, for some materials they're not interested, and then in that case, you would give them the presentation. You would try to give it to them. If you see that it's not working, it's not clicking with them, and don't give up so easy. Try again. But then if you see that, find some other way to work with the same content in a way that is attractive to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yes, all the children receive the same presentations, the same sequence of presentations, but some of them advance quite fast, and others need to take their time and work with the same concept a little bit longer before advancing, to make sure that you're not asking something of them that they're not yet prepared to do, so that they're not frustrated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Someone else has asked if you've considered just recording audio and not having video.
What's that?
If you've ever considered just recording audio and not having the video.
So the video, yes, the video is very important. I have done that. I had a bracelet, and I know right now there's smartwatches. When I had the bracelet, there weren't smartwatches yet, and it was awful. It didn't work at all. The sound was awful. And what I found is really important for video footage is be able to retrieve the context. It's sometimes with young children, it's very difficult to understand what they're saying unless you relive the actual situation and the actual interaction.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I have tried everything. I've definitely tried just audio. I wasn't happy.
And then another question about the Golden Cape time. Is it clearly a game? By that, she means, do the children recognize that you're pretending? And if so, do they accept it in a playful way and are then aware when it's over? How do they take this?
How do they react? Yeah. Well, we talk about a lot of times before we read a book, and we try to steer away as much as possible from fiction at this age group. But of course, there's a lot of class favorites that are fiction, of books that they love to read. And one of the things we talk about a lot is this fiction, or is this real, or is this fiction? No. The younger children, they have very concrete, at this age, they haven't developed the abstraction a lot of times to be able to know when things are real and when things aren't. But
Yeah.
I'm very careful to explain to them that before I put on the cape, always, that it's a game, that I actually really do understand Spanish, that that would be crazy if you put on a clothing article that you'd stop to understand. That it was a game, and that if they want to play, they're welcome to play, but if they'd like to observe, they'd like to observe. And it was in the video also, they'd already been in circle for like 30 minutes at that time. Wow. And it was just before lunchtime, so they'd already had the full work cycle. So you see some of the kids are like respectful, but they're just like, but that's something I think normal at this age group.
You can tell they're getting ready for lunch, like going to wash their hands or do different things. So
but I try to stress that it's a game, and they don't want to play, they don't have to play. And I do want to make it very, very, very clear that it's a very once in a while thing, but it was just so incredibly interesting to see how they reacted, and to get them to push that.
Right. So and I think that's all. I think it is important what you're saying, that because it's obviously has caught our attention. Everything that you've presented.
But I'm happy.
But I think it's also, you as a teacher, you have these resources that you really don't use that often. You're really saving them because they are really potent, and so you don't want them to kind of wear out the effect.
No, but in general, their attitude when I put it on, they all start saying automatically, "I love that cape. I love that cape. Beautiful cape." They're like really
They get into it immediately. They
give me a
really
lot
love
of
it.
compliment. You know, so they're real into it. And if they weren't, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, of course. Right. Right. So I'm just curious if anyone has comments about any other part of Danielle's presentation. She really did cover so much for us. That, I mean, one of the things, I mean, I have a couple of things, but I'll give people a minute to think.
Well, I'd be interesting to know sort of what follows after the 3 years in the children's house. What experience do you have of how children then bring their language acquisition and their language experience to school years? You're probably very close to your colleagues in the school, know a lot about that too.
Yeah, it's been a group effort because what we were seeing, it started out with the younger children when we started the school. Now the children that I started with are going to graduate. They're sixth graders now. They're going to finish. So we have seen that these tactics through the years, that this extra attention has increased the production. When they get to elementary stages, they're much more willing and open to use the second language. We've seen a spike in their abilities over time. Also, as they become they develop more abstract thinking, and they have what we have seen something very interesting. And I think that something I've consulted, I think actually you in a previous talk, is we've noticed that the accent is very American and very they really capture the accent in the early stages in 3 to 6. And it's something that we see that their production increases as they go to elementary, but that their accent becomes much more Spanish. And I think that's been really interesting. And I think your response was that they have different needs. They're more interested, instead of this, this need to be with the teacher, to be with the educator, they have more of the need to be with their peers. And so over time, it just, it's another question that I have. But we see that the efforts that we've taken have helped to make it more of a natural thing in our community, because in the end, we are working with curricular content in both languages, and there's a limited amount of time, and to work with all subject areas in both languages is a huge challenge. But we have seen the effects, and they, in general, they really love speaking. And when they get to elementary stages, they usually speak a lot. And at that stage, they do have, after they've had that much exposure and that much opportunity, there are a little bit more obligations to use at those levels, at higher levels, after they've had these years of the gentle encouragement.
Yeah, thank you.
So Aoife, I see, has a question. Aoife, do you want to just ask it yourself?
Okay, I mean, it's really a comment, and I didn't want to stop anybody else making a comment or a question, but my comment was that I really value the way you've organized the lexicon, the vocabulary, and made it kind of sequential, so that you start with a certain selection of words that are logically the right kind of words to work on. And I think it contrasts with what happens when they try to use content and language integrated learning with very young children, where, in my view, the tendency is to try to kind of get in the academic vocabulary too early. And so children, like exactly the example you said, a child that can't say a basic phrase in English, they're trying to teach them photosynthesis or something like that. And so I just, congratulations for that. That's
You
my
know,
comment.
it's something that seems so logical, but when
Yeah.
you want to give them this immersion and you just trust that it's all useful, but then you see that we've seen a huge difference once we've done this progression in using this vocabulary in their production, because in the end they can only produce what they've acquired, and they only acquire what they're exposed to. And so if this special attention to this work, it's you know it's been a game changer, honestly.
And I think that using the Cambridge vocabulary lists is a really good idea, because I'm sure those are words that they've researched, to designate those as the vocabulary words for the younger children. So yeah, I just think that it's a great idea for coordination and for making that solid foundation that really will make it work for the children later on.
Well, and that kind of bounces to what my burning question has been, is what is the criteria when you make this list with your colleagues, or however you do it?
It's been a process. We think about first the things that the children are going to want to talk about. What are they going to want to tell us? What do they tell us in Spanish? What kind of words do they need? What kind of things are they interested in talking about? Because they're going to need that vocabulary to be able to speak. Also, of course, keep taking into account that they need to have an extremely even more progression, a fine-tuned progression in their reading, as opposed to their first language. It's incredibly different at the second language level. To take that into account as well, like to what comes first, what's the priority, and it's a work in progress. There's not any like, this is it.
No, no.
It's always a trial and errors, and you try to do your best, and you see, woof, this was very ambitious, and then you
Right.
pull back a little bit, and then you realize, hey, well, they've already mastered all these words in the first month. Let's open up the progression. It's been, I think the first step was just to take away the words that were not useful.
Helpful, not useful.
Before we work with tusk, let's work with elephant, so that they know what a tusk is. Because I used to have objects. I love these miniatures in Montessori at the stage. And on the photo that we have miniatures, activities that when they first start to read, they match CVC words to their miniatures and words. And I've become obsessed with miniatures. It sounds really strange, but every trip back to the United States, I'm like on the hunt for miniatures, and I find this beautiful miniature. But and this is kind of something that I ended up getting to the point where it's like, this is not practical. Have this beautiful thing, and when they read the word and they're like, woo, or us, walrus, and they're like, what's that? It's this animal here. Like, okay, well, I've worked with walrus before, great, I can put this beautiful walrus. No, but that's kind of where it started, and then it became like a constant thought experiment.
Exactly.
It's definitely by no means finished, and we're always fine-tuning, and we're always thinking about what could, but the main thing is that they understand the language that they're receiving, and that once they want to produce, that they're able to say, they have the tools to be able to do so.
Yeah, and I think that, I can imagine a lot of people would be like, okay, Danielle, can you give us your list? And, you could or not, but I think that what I'm thinking is, at the end of the day, each person, each school in the place where they are, you really are observing the needs of the children that you have.
Yes, exactly.
The vocabulary that they are acquiring and what they're not acquiring, but that you see that they really should be. So I think it's true what you're saying, that it's a dynamic and organic process, I would imagine.
Yes, and I think it's important for every, to start at those bases, to think about maybe the 4 points that I had of the words that we and start thinking about it, start noticing, start observing, to be able to, and in general, you know, it's not just vocabulary, it's everything. It's everything to try to focus, because in the end, we want to do everything. We want to do as much as possible, but there's only so many hours a day. And I think it's a reality for a lot of bilingual schools. You're teaching the content in 2 languages, and that even makes it more difficult in Montessori environments where it's one-on-one instruction. It's an incredible challenge. So yeah, to create goals, see if you meet those goals. If you don't, take a step back, go back to the drawing board, try to create something less and work it from there. Because in the end, if you try to do everything, a lot of times we lose the focus.
Yep. Yep. Yes. Any last comment, question from anyone? And one more thing I'll comment on, in part because it's a kind of unconventional strategy to ask the Spanish speaker who's with you, Veronica, to use English sometimes. And that you actually found that it had the desired effect, which is to create this culture of learning a language, and that the children then want to help her. Because a lot of people might say, like, no, you don't want to confuse them, you know. So I think that is really an interesting insight. Again, just from your trial and error to see what works, but that's why we're here. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah. Hello, I just wonder if I could just sort of interject something?
Sure.
Yeah. Just I'm Andy. I've been sort of participating kind of in the background, but I haven't really stepped up here. I come up from a different perspective, I think, because I'm a Montessorian in spirit, but I'm not officially like trained as a guide yet, but I certainly am planning on doing it, and even doing the program that Danielle did in University of Vic. Thought about doing that as well. What I guess my maybe different point of view is this kind of dynamic between Montessori respecting the child and their independence, and then coming from sort of a different orientation where there's a lot of drilling and this kind of thing. And this is of course why we're here, the beauty of Montessori, and really giving the child the freedom to speak in the second language when they want to, rather than sort of forcing them to. But then on the other side of that coin is of having them making sure there is communication, like Danielle said, where we're giving that little sort of gentle push where they are speaking, otherwise they're not going to. So I just found that part of it very interesting, coming from maybe a different place. And how can we get them sort of like necessity is the mother of invention, and we need to communicate, we need to solve problems. And that's what I actually found the Cape, and I think maybe a lot of us are really interested in the Cape. I would be tempted with my personality to wear the Cape all afternoon or all day, just to see what would happen. Anyway, that's my perspective. But I mean, we're all kind of. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, and also I think a lot of us weren't lucky enough to come from Montessori, and we didn't have Montessori education when we were younger, and it is like a very nice way for the children, but for the educator who have this goal, it's an added challenge, and it makes you definitely a creative thinker. Always open also to new ideas. If anybody's like, well, I know an idea, of course we're always open to new experiments and new tactics.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I've noticed your name, and it's nice to see your face and hear get to know a little bit where you're coming from. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks to everyone who's come today. I know a lot of people aren't here with us now, but are looking forward to the recording. And yeah, just thanks to everyone in our team who does all the behind the scenes work and makes these events run seamlessly. And yeah, maybe we'll get you, Danielle, to give us another talk in the future.
So I would be honored.
Our last mentee that we do for every talk. How horrible that I almost forgot. And basically it's to know your aha moment, your eureka moment from the talk today. And this is just another way for you to give feedback to Danielle and also to our team, so we understand what's important to you and what you're appreciating from our work. Maybe some people have already had to leave because we've actually already gone over for by a few minutes. But let's just wait and see for who's here. Yeah, people are sharing. That's right, parent education and how you can give them ideas. Yes, the thoughtfulness of optimizing vocabulary input for the children. I agree. That's very nice, Danielle. A testament to your communication skills, the clarity of your vocabulary, and the way that you were able to explain things to parents, training assistants, and other adults in the school. The interstage coordination, which is always so important, that the school, everyone's working together between one level and another, and the dynamic between immersion and staying true to Montessori principles. Yeah, and that is so much of, I think that sums up a lot of what many of our speakers in this series have been talking about. So thank you all for sharing that and for hanging on for a couple more minutes. So now I think we can say goodbye, right, Lucy?
Well,
Definitely.
we have one more question in the chat.
Sorry.
If
Okay.
no, it's okay. It just came in a little late. I can read it.
Okay.
How important, let's see, could I please also ask how important Danielle thinks it is to keep it one language, one teacher?
I think it should be consistent, but I think that we can be a little bit flexible. I don't think that, obviously the Spanish language lessons are going to be in Spanish. The English lessons are going to be in English. I'm not going to speak to the children in Spanish ever. But at first we were very strict about that it has to be only input, the children who come to read from higher levels, from elementary, they come to read of our kids, they're not native speakers. But the most important thing, I think, is to have these important references, these important figures that the children, kind of like a role model that the children want to imitate. So to be thoughtful of the way you do it, I think that it's fine. I would never use like over reliance. I think it is important to kind of stick to one language, but I think it's important for them to see also, but that bilingualism is a reality, and a lot of people know both languages, and that's okay. But if you're in my situation, just to be thoughtful the way that you do it.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, So shall we try again to say goodbye? And we'll see you next time when we'll have another person sharing her experience in a children's house. This time in starting a Spanish or an English corner in a Spanish speaking classroom. So we look forward to that and look forward to seeing you all again.